Are you looking to expand your aesthetic practice and attract high-quality new patients? Discover the power of digital marketing in growing your practice with a personalized strategy session. Schedule your meeting with Ryan today by visiting www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM and take the first step towards transforming your practice with the potential of digital marketing.
You're invited to join our exclusive monthly webinar brought to you by the Business of Aesthetics community. Don't let this chance slip through your fingers. Secure your spot now for a game-changing experience. Register for free on our homepage at www.businessofesthetics.org and get set to transform your strategies.
Welcome to another episode of the Business of Aesthetics podcast, sponsored by Equa Marketing. Join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities to network with our guests and other professionals by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Today, we're thrilled to introduce Ryan Davies, a digital marketing advisor at Equa Marketing. As a certified Sandler sales and challenger expert, he brings innovative sales techniques that drive results. Let's dive in.
Welcome to another captivating installment of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I'm Ryan Davies, your co-host at the heart of the Business of Aesthetics community and podcast. Before we immerse ourselves in the riches of today's episode, I want to thank and express my profound gratitude to all of you, our incredible listeners from across the United States and all corners of the globe. Your willingness to embrace and share this podcast and your invaluable insights and experiences have collectively transformed our community into a thriving epicenter of wisdom and innovation. It is your unwavering dedication that is the cornerstone of our success, and we cannot thank you enough. Without further ado, we are going to dive right into our main topic today around KPIs and the right metrics to make your business better and make your medical aesthetics practice thrive. With that, I have just the most amazing co-host with me today, Jessica Hunter. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me on this one.
Such a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
I absolutely love anytime we get into like really good business and data. I guess I'm a nerd that way. You know, I get excited by spreadsheets, which is probably very weird to say. But that's kind of where I'm at. I really love data analytics and helping people uncover solutions. I know that is kind of your passion too and what you've done. So tell us a little bit about your background, what led you to start Hunter Consulting, and really your interest specifically with medical aesthetic practices.
Yeah, well, I always say that I kind of got, stuck in this industry. I probably wasn't, the common pathway to consulting. I didn't work, as a technician or as a nurse or, a manager in a clinic. I actually got recruited from Allergan to come help their large practices with their businesses because, of course, this was, almost 10 years ago where we had doctors and surgeons and dermatologists who actually also became entrepreneurs, lo and behold, that they didn't really realize it. And at the time, Allergan had such a massive share of the business and in the industry. And they thought, if we can just help these people understand their business and how to, be more profitable and see more patients and really understand, the belly of their business, we'll make more money. And so, they kind of said, can you come on? Can you teach them about their business? And that's how I started. So I spent 5 years at Allergan just helping their top clients on how to build their business, how to be more strategic, and really, starting with their financials and understanding that. And then I think, what led me to just, going out on my own and starting Hunter Consulting was I just kind of wanted my own path to do it. I had found that, there was certain things that I thought were valuable that I wanted to really teach my clients and educate them about. And really just sort of inspire them. And I was so inspired by, how much they knew, about what they did, and then how much they just seeked, to want to know more about their business. And they were so vulnerable and sort of authentic about just like, listen, Jess, I don't know, how to read a P&L, a profit and loss statement. I don't understand these metrics, but I want to, So I think that's sort of how I say I always got kind of, fell into it and then got stuck in it because I became so passionate about just the complexity of the industry and how much you can really help, people that didn't have this background, but had all the knowledge in the world to be great providers. So that's a little bit about how I sort of came to be here. It's been almost 10 years consulting in the industry, both in Canada and the US. And, throughout that time, I've obviously just learned a lot, and it's been such a great experience. And as I continue to grow, I definitely hope to continue to share that with my clients.
I love it. When I'm not doing this and hosting podcasts and everything else that I'm doing, I do a lot of these practice growth meetings with clients or potential clients or just people from the BOA community, and we always get into these talks of exactly that. Hey, I'm a provider. I'm very skilled at what I do, but I'm very good in my lane. And then we start talking about things, and sometimes I find I have to even rewind and catch myself up here because I'll be talking about different KPIs and metrics and numbers. And they're like, wait, so many acronyms, slow down, help me out here. So
Yes.
maybe let's start from the base there for those who might not be familiar of even, they know their numbers or they know like revenue and things like that, but connecting those dots with KPIs or key performance indicators is crucial. So maybe talk to our audience about that. Explain what they are and why they're important for medical aesthetics practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, KPIs, key performance indicators, is just sort of a buzzword in our industry. And really all it means is that we're utilizing something to measure success. That's really what it is. And I say, like, there are some basic KPIs that we're going to talk about right now that I think every business owner in the medical aesthetics community really need to pay attention to. They're the basic ones. But I also think that you need to understand a little bit about what your long-term vision is. So, if you're looking to grow and scale into multiple locations, if you're looking to potentially partner or sell within the 3 to 5 year range, there's a plethora of different goals that I think, you really need to understand. And that will actually dictate, what we're measuring and why. But for a real general sense, I mean, first and foremost, you need to have just a really good grasp on your monthly revenue and where it's coming from. So segmenting, the services and treatments and services you're providing into certain segments so you can have a really good grasp. So injectables, laser devices, facial aesthetics, retail products, you want to put these into groups and categories, and then just overall have a good general sense of where month by month that business is coming from. And then you should have a percentage from your total revenue, right? So if we see our injectables, we want to know that, okay, it's 65% of our total revenue in January came from injectables. That's the kind of information that's so helpful. You can look month after month, year after year, quarter after quarter, right? So that's basic. That's the very first thing I would say. Once you have that kind of down and you can at least understand where your revenue is coming from, I want you to spend time on figuring out how profitable each treatment you provide is. And this is something I do with every single one of my clients. So we'll take a look at, what their pricing is for their treatment, what their consumables, some miscellaneous consumables, what their overhead expenses for that hour that they're providing the treatment, what we pay our staff for that hour of the treatment, right? And then we take all that into consideration and say, okay, so, actually this treatment costs us $400 an hour. We're charging $500 an hour. Wow, this is our profit margin that we're making from this treatment. What else can we do to increase this margin if it's not, meeting, the suffice sort of amount that we want it to? Can we create more value? Can it be done in less amount of time? Is the consumable cost too high for this price? Do we have to adjust the price accordingly? And it's really important to go through this process so you have a good understanding of exactly what is profitable and what isn't. Because you get into situations where you're like, oh, I don't have any consumables on this product, Jess. I don't have any consumables on laser hair removal. This is a common one. So, oh, it's a great service for us. Well, really, actually, when we drill down, is it a good service for us? How much time does it take? Who's providing that service, depending on what state and the providers that can do it? And it gives you a way more kind of clear understanding of that. So those are two for sure. I just say like kind of clinic KPIs. When it comes to your provider, understanding how much revenue your provider generates for every hour they're in the business is 100% for sure you need to know. Okay. So, this is a very simplistic thing, but it's also just kind of understanding where we have these providers that are coming in and are generating revenue. This is how you can really compare, I say, apples to apples and orange to orange, right? My famous saying is always, all of our staff we treat fairly, but not all of our staff are equal. And that's a really kind of important statement to kind of take and swallow because it's true. And so we want to be fair to everyone and give everybody that fair opportunity. But if we don't know, how productive our staff is and what their intangible value as well is, how can we really, kind of nurture and help our staff be the best that they can be and strive for their goals and objectives as well.
Really love all of that. I think I'm going to already say, and usually I say this towards the end of the episode, but this is one you're going to want to come back and listen to again and take the notes off of and everything, because I think that's so critical. And I've, in my world, and I've just always felt this way. And I've told, people I've worked with this or whoever else that, busy does not mean profitable, or busy does not mean successful, right? So I think you break that down beautifully in the fact of a lot of people I get, we're so busy, but I'm not making money, or we're so busy and I don't understand how it's not better, right? Or I was making more money when I was seeing less people, and you're like, okay, like let's wake up to this then and understand what
Absolutely.
that means, and doing all of that. So, I think those are incredibly important. Do you find that they often get like are certain ones overlooked? Are there other ones we didn't talk about that are overlooked a lot in practices, or do you find that mostly it's just you know, you're either kind of an all in or all out on the data side and the KPI side of things?
Well, I think the important piece, Ryan, like to your point, is that listen, this is data, so you have to understand what to do with the data. And I think kind of having those people to kind of coach you and teach you what they mean. So, for example, if we're seeing our nurse injector and she does $500 an hour in revenue, is that good? Is that bad? What does that mean? And so I'm a big component of like, listen, we need to have benchmarks and understand, month to month, and sort of follow someone's progress based on their experience, their expertise, their capacity and the services they provide. There are other things to consider when you're looking at it, and then there's also just industry benchmarks. Where do we see really good nurse providers sit at? I mean, these are sort of things that you kind of also have to have in conjunction with the data to make really informed decisions. So, it's one thing to, have a really good, EMR system or software system that plugs you out this, but it's another to understand what to do with it. So, I think those are really basic KPIs. I mean, we could go into the weeds of like other things to definitely manage. And I think as your business grows, you need to, for sure. We need to, really understand how much revenue we're doing for every patient we see. When you really want to start building on, frequency and volume, and increasing your revenue month to month, year to year. But I think, just to get started, this is this will tell you a lot, and it will really impact your business if you can kind of, I always say, understand these three. And be able to, implement really good informed business decisions with them.
I like that. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. And you've talked about how just before, when you were leading into it, there's certain things that are just a foundation, a must. And then there's the nice to haves. And then you keep kind of going, right? Like you wouldn't go build a house by picking out your kitchen cabinet handles first and then go, oh yeah, but I don't really care about the foundation that's going to hold the house up, because these I need these handles, right? Like, great, but you got to kind of work to get to that point and understand it a little better. So I really kind of love that thought process to get there. This is going to be the challenge. And you people like you that are consultants in this, absolutely critical. Like you said, it's wonderful. And you'd mentioned there, and I just kind of want to call that out as well. What might be a critical metric for one, maybe less important for another, depending on a number of factors, right? So it's really important to go through that. But to get started and to get going, how do you recommend, a practice implements an effective KPI tracking system so that they have these numbers to share with someone like you to go, all right, now help me from here to level this up? What's kind of your thought process behind that?
Yeah, well, I think we've got some great EMR tools in our industry. We've got some great platforms that have come into the industry and really built out some great opportunities to, understand the data and pull the data that we need. So, I think there are some good platforms for that. First and foremost, there are some systems out there that are sort of been, kind of grandfathered into our industry, sort of come along, and I've gone through that experience with clients where we just can't pull the data. It isn't sorted in that way. So you want to have, it always starts with obviously sort of that fundamental piece of like, you can only get what, you can only get the information out of a system that has it. So, you want to have a system that's going to allow you to pull really simplistic reports that, you can customize to like what you're looking and what you're needing. So I think that's the first thing. If you're starting out, in this industry, in the medical aesthetics or plastic surgery industry, you've got to kind of think about the fundamentals. And when I'm starting with a client right from the beginning, we have that opportunity to do some demos with, some of the EMR software systems I would suggest to go with, just because of my experience of working with them. So I know what it can produce, and find something that's the right solution for you, because it's not really a one size, fits all. There are some systems that will allow you to have multiple locations easier, or other systems that, are more geared towards plastics. And so you have to kind of, figure that out. But yes, to your point, there are systems out there where we just can't pull that data. And so it's a question of like, okay, if we're really looking to grow and scale, is this an opportunity to maybe look to find better resources for us and better tools that are going to allow us to get that? Because if your system can't allow you to even pull, very simplistic reports this way, it's not going to be valuable to us.
For smaller practices, and we have quite a large section of our audience that is like that are, maybe even like a single owner, single administrator, single injector, whatever it is, type of do it all kind of a role.
Mm-hmm.
It can be challenging. How do you recommend, and how can these challenges kind of be overcome in collecting and interpreting KPIs for smaller practices that are really trying to grasp that next stage of growth?
Yeah, listen, I'm also a believer in sort of, again, thinking about what your long-term strategy is. If you're a single provider and you're just starting out, is your goal to bring on additional providers? And if it is, you absolutely you need to move the needle into something that's going to give you a little bit more robust information, a little bit more capacity and ability to, again, patient files and before and after photos. And there's a plethora of things that we're probably not going to go into today. But I would suggest absolutely one of the best investments you can make is launching into a software system that is going to allow you to grow into it. Because I promise you, you might not use all the capabilities today, but if your goal is to, grow in size, grow in providers, grow in locations, it always happens every single time that we end up going back and saying, okay, now we're going to have to invest into something else. And so that can be done, and that's no big deal. But it's certainly, if you're just starting out, I would suggest starting from the beginning with something that's going to allow you to do that. Because unfortunately, some of the systems that are out there that I think some of our single or solo providers that just are starting out that gravitate to, aren't made for our industry. And they're just not made for our KPIs and reporting abilities. So they're just never going to let you kind of access the info that you're really going to need. So I do highly suggest going with one of the vendors that are customized in our industry, because it will just allow you for so much ease and better understanding right from the get-go.
Just, I think one of the things I'd love to find out as well is maybe just, putting you on the spot a little bit, but like a case study or an example or two where you've gone in and been able to see how maybe a data-driven decision has helped somebody who's generally been like, well, I'm intuition based, or I go with what I'm feeling. And you've been able to sort of shift that mindset. And then they go, oh, wow, I really like numbers now. I really like data. Now
Yes.
I see it, right? But maybe it didn't happen. I'm sure you have countless examples of it, but maybe something that might come to mind where you say, hey, look, real world example for the audience. This is kind of what it could look like for you.
Well, I think honestly, Ryan, one of the biggest real world examples, and I think we're all kind of, hearing this so much, is talking about membership platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, everybody wants a membership, and there's so many great things to, creating a platform for, consistent loyalty and retention. And that's what a membership is, So, but it's also, understanding what sort of services and treatments and discounts and promotional offerings you're putting in that. So that happens a lot where someone will say, either I want to create something, or, hey, I have this membership and, I've got 25 members and it's never really taken off and the staff haven't really bought into it. And there's or it doesn't make any money for us. And I think when you go by that and when you go through that and you really assess it financially first and foremost, so you're choosing, treatments and services that are, have a lot of value add, that profitably makes sense to put into a membership, that the membership is priced accordingly. And again, we're considering the staff time and our overhead costs and our consumables. There's a plethora of things in there that you need to consider. But I think, when we really structure it so that we're like, okay, great, this is a profitable platform. There's a ton of value here. It makes sense. We're converting injectable clients into aesthetic clients. That's the whole goal. It's retention and loyalty. We're building it out to do all those things. I mean, that's where people are like, oh my God, I'm so glad we ran the numbers first. I'm so glad, Jess, we took a look at, what services to put in here for all of those reasons. And that's the number one thing I think happens. And the number two thing would probably come from packages for sure. So bundling services together, both injectables or laser treatments. I mean, that also, typically I'll come in and I'll be like, well, how did you come up with, a set of 3, for Morpheus 8? They're like, well, I just discounted it by 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever it is. I'm like, how's that working for you? We didn't even think about that. These are, 3 separate treatments, 3 separate times. There's no strategy behind it. And they're like, yeah, I barely break even when I do a three set of package kind of thing. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, does it? So, it is just thinking about it more strategically instead of sort of just, copying what everybody else or in the market is doing. My also claim to fame, I think, saying is like, just, stick to yourself, be focused on you, really invest that time on you and your business. And I promise you will not care what the competition is doing down the street. It won't be relevant because the decisions you're making aren't based on what they're doing. It's based on you being the most efficient and most profitable possible, treating your staff well, leading with, compassion and empathy and doing all the right things. And I promise you, your business will come to fruition. It's when we focus so much on everybody else that the clutter and the noise get us distracted on what our actual own vision and goal is and what we're trying to achieve. So I don't know if that was a really long-winded way to answer it, but
It's funny because that just resonates with me. I was talking with someone earlier this week and we were having a growth meeting and they were talking more about their competitors' practice than their own. They knew their numbers and I mean, like, not obviously to a T, but they were talking about their traffic and this, well, they added this service. Okay. Should I add this service? And I'm like, I don't know. Why would you, what makes you say that, right? Like, is it just a keeping up with the Joneses thing that you're thinking? And I think that's another huge part where KPIs come in. And we see this all the time is when a vendor rep comes in and shows all of these great sheets of all of your ROI that you're going to get and all their KPIs. And you go, I need to invest in this now, right? And then it doesn't come to fruition, right? So maybe touch on that as well in terms of using these KPIs to know, again, like you just said, is it time to increase headcount? Is it time to invest in this new device? Is it time to do something totally different, right? And how critical it is for that side of things.
Yeah, and I think you're speaking my language here. Hey, I love all my vendors. I love you guys. I absolutely do. You're such an important piece to this industry. I think again, but it's true. We get distracted by all the new shiny things, right? So sometimes, we're investing in something else when we have another piece of equipment that's generating absolutely no revenue for us or no profit. But those are things that we don't know. So I think when we start with even talking about the providers too, and we take a look at like sort of the provider spread. So what services are they providing? I think injectors are a really easy one to look at because if you have an injector who's doing, 70% Botox, 30% filler, that makes a difference on what we're paying them, and how much profit we're making off them. That's a very distinct, difference between something. But if you don't understand your provider and sort of, the spread of the services that they're providing, what you're paying them and what they're generating, because that's the distinction too. If we're paying somebody, X and they're bringing in Y and we're like, wow, every month we lose on them essentially. And it's important to do this for all your staff, but it's really important to do it your providers because it's a service-based business. So we are relying on them to generate the revenue. So those are the sort of decision-making factors, if this person is, under capacity, so they're still not, seeing as many patients as they could be, are they still not generating the average amount of revenue we want? Is there still room in their schedule? No, we're not going to bring on another provider. There's lots of avenues there. If, we are doing something, we're like launching a membership, for example, that's a really good opportunity to bring in a junior esthetician, for example, to take on some of that workload. And then we have our other more senior estheticians that can really dive into, our laser devices or things that need more training, skill, or education. So there's lots of different reasons that when you start assessing that and understanding those KPIs, that you can make those more informed decisions about your business and when you need to hire, when you don't, when you need to bring in new equipment and when you don't. So I think sometimes, we just kind of make these decisions based on intuition without kind of really understanding, is it really the best time or the best investment?
Yeah. With that in mind, I'd love to get your take on this because data is only as good as if you're reviewing it and using it and doing anything with it. How much time or how often should we be reviewing various KPIs we've set? And I think that, again, this is probably a loaded question because there's some things you should maybe know daily and some things you should know quarterly or annually, right? Like it kind of depends. But I know that also someone like me who loves data, I do have, paralysis by analysis sometimes by standing there and going, oh, I want to learn about this next and this. And I just keep digging and digging and digging. And I'm like, oh, missed the train. It's gone. It left the station. I forgot to, I was so busy that researching. So what's your thoughts on that of setting it up to say like, hey, look, don't ignore it, but don't dive too deep that you're
I agree. And you and I are obviously, listen, I love a good spreadsheet. I love the information, right? I mean, I love that. That's where definitely a part where I thrive. But I think, again, when we're talking to people that are service providers and caretakers and nurturers, and, it's a different, they're a different breed, and they don't necessarily relate as well to maybe data on a spreadsheet. So you want to keep it really simplistic. So my general rule of thumb for sure is, again, when we're talking about providers, they should have their own targets and goals, and they're set each week and each month. And it's our job as a management team to kind of keep that at the forefront of their mind. If that's something that we feel like is important to keep them motivated and driven and continue to be, successful in their role. So that's one piece. And I think when we look again at KPIs as an owner or management in the role, monthly and quarterly are good time periods. To look at something weekly is a lot. And we all know that when you're working in the business and managing a team and a clinic, and it might not be as realistic. And looking at, the week of, January 1st, 2023 and January 1st, 2024, they could be very different. So if we look at a month, we have a good seasonality, we have a good time frame. It allows us to really have a good comparison, because we're always benchmarking ourselves first and foremost, so our own data, seeing how we're growing and developing and changing. And then a quarter is a good time period. So when you're taking a look at understanding, all of your KPIs, which we haven't gone into, but of course, understanding, your cost of goods, your payroll, your marketing, your overhead expenses, that's a good time period, as well as kind of understanding, how you did in terms of your revenue, your profit margins, all of that. So it's, again, because we are kind of a seasonality business, we have highs and lows. A lot of things kind of come into it. I think, when we think about it, monthly and quarterly are good time periods, and giving your staff targets each week and each month to hit are also good time periods.
Love it. And, besides tapping you on the shoulder, which we are going to talk about after this, but for practices that are like, okay, so how do I stay ahead of this? How do I learn about KPIs? How do I use this to my advantage? What's your recommendation for that? And of course, same thing I say with marketing all the time, right? It's if you don't understand it, it's great to get someone to at least help you get the grasp on it first before you run with it. But for somebody who's like, hey, I just got to get this started. I got to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
What's your kind of recommendation for that?
Yeah, listen, I am going to say that you should definitely partner with somebody who has that expertise. So someone who understands the industry, but also has a really good financial background to be able to walk you through it in a way that's applicable to you and realistic and simple. Those are the things. You don't need to, I always say, you don't need to really understand your P&L in great detail. That's your accountant's job. And you should understand some, obviously, general sense of it, for sure. I get that. And that will come in time. But understanding just your day-to-day numbers, your month-to-month numbers, your quarterly numbers, that's something where I think, if you can bring in someone who can walk you through that, take a look. And I always say, assess your business first, see where you're at today, see where you want to go, and then help you create the KPIs to get there. That's what's really impactful. So if you partner with a consultant that has that background, that can do that, really understand your business as a unique kind of venture or a unique entity, I think that's important. Build that out for you and say, hey, here's how realistically we're going to track this. Here's how we're going to measure this. And the KPIs, like I said, are, in general, there's some that we always want to look at, but there's also ones that we want to create based on where you want to go with your business, your direction, vision, and objectives. And I think that part's important too, that we sometimes forget, asking those questions, hey, have you thought about where you want to be 3 to 5 years from now? Okay, cool. How do we get you there? Great. Let's measure that. Right? Let's put all of our resources and time and energy into getting you there. So I think that's a really important piece to that as well.
I love that. And, I think it's just people who are coming to, listen to great podcast guests like yourself to get information and all of that, right? It all helps with the research, but I think that's a perfect segue, because I'm sure there are many listeners now who are going, okay, now what? Yes, I need some help here. So tell our listeners how they can learn more about you and get in touch with you regarding consulting services, and again, just sort of any other background you've got that would be very helpful for our audience here.
Well, first and foremost, I have some free resources on my website, and one of them is for KPIs. So I would highly recommend, so you can go to 100consultingservice.com, click on resources. You're going to be able to download, the 3 best KPIs, in general, I believe, that you should be measuring. And it's going to walk you through how to do that. I speak a lot at different conferences about KPIs. So, it's something that's obviously near and dear to my heart. And I feel like the more that you can share and sort of, disseminate that education to people that don't know, I'm more than happy to do that. So go ahead. There's one there. There's also one on staff compensation, which we didn't really get to today, which is another huge hot topic that I love to talk about. And, just download them and start with that. Take a look at it, see what you think, see if that, that kind of resonates. You can definitely book a free discovery call with me at any point. I am happy to, walk you through, see where your business is at and walk you through any suggestions or recommendations I can do in terms of moving forward. But obviously that is what I do. I do one-on-one consulting. I do start with financial, assessment, clinic optimization, marketing communication strategies. Those are sort of like, the buckets that we walk through. But start with that. I think that would be really helpful to you guys. And I think that will, be a really good, foundation for you to start thinking about KPIs or key performance indicators you need to be measuring.
Love it. And it sounds like with the staff wages, someone just booked another appearance here on the Business of
It's the best. I love talking about
there
it.
It is. We've got our next topic, and I'm already excited for that one too. So that is wonderful. Before we sign off, I just would love to give you the parting words here in terms of, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience around the importance of measuring the right metrics for their practice?
The only thing I would say is, every time, I start working with somebody and start working with a new client, they always say to me like, oh, I don't know this, or like, and they feel sort of, dumb or not educated in it. And then they sort of apologize for it. And I just want you guys to know everybody's in the same boat. No one expects you as a nurse, doctor, physician, surgeon to have gone to, business school and understand this. So it's totally fine. And it's totally normal. And, that's why I do what I do and you do what you do. And so, it's okay to definitely look out for someone who's an expert in that and help with that. And I promise you that investment today will reap value for you and your business years to come. It is absolutely a foundational piece that you can do right now. It's just to understand your business, understand your financials and what you want to measure so that you can measure for success as you move forward.
I think that was just incredible. And, it's that old adage of you can't, figure out how to get somewhere without knowing where you are now. Back in, those old days where you had paper maps, right?
Yes.
You would never go, well, I want to get to here, but I have no idea on where I am on the map. So I'm just going to start turning left and see what happens, right? You need to know where your starting point is to get to where you're going. And I think, Jessica, you absolutely nailed that. And I think you're just an invaluable resource. I encourage all of our listeners definitely to go and get that, the resource guides, and we'll, include it in the show notes and everything else as well. So It makes it really easy. But thank you, Jessica Hunter, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule and away from those one-on-ones to fill us in, the masses in, and taking us through your journey and the importance of the KPIs and metrics for growing medical aesthetic practices. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. Such a pleasure. I'm very, very happy to help in any way I can.
Excellent. And as I said, we're gonna have her back again for sure, because I love that staff wages conversation next. So I'm just gonna put that right in the calendar right after this. But before we do any of that, I'll take a moment to thank all of our listeners and let you know how much we appreciate each and every one of you. We can't do what we do without you. So if you like our podcast, please kindly share it with friends and colleagues on social media. And don't forget to write a review on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you're listening. It's your thoughts and amazing words that will help bring us incredible doctors and practice owners and guests just like Jessica Hunter here to give us all the expertise that they have. So until we meet again, I'm wishing everybody an amazing week ahead. Thanks and take care.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsor, Equa Marketing. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetic business, providing quality patient care or their clinical expertise? Head over to www.businessofaesthetics.org podcast show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's speakers or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you, and have a great day.